My name is Sarah Oliveira, and if you saw me a few years ago, you would probably think I was living every woman's dream. At 32, I was a famous model. My face was on magazine covers, TV commercials, and billboards in every major city in the country. I walked elegantly on the most famous catwalks, wearing dresses that were worth more than my mother's car. Luxury was part of my routine. Fancy events, glamorous parties, 5-star hotels. And the strangest thing is, on the outside, everything seemed perfect. But inside was another story. I grew up in a small town in the countryside, in a simple middle-class family. My mother was a teacher, and my father worked for the city government. I had a peaceful childhood, with dreams that seemed bigger than the sky in that city. Since I was little, I was fascinated by fashion magazines and fashion shows on TV, and I dreamed of being recognized, admired, of being famous. I remember the day a scout approached me in the city center when I was 16. I was wearing faded jeans and a blouse borrowed from my cousin. At that moment, I felt like I had won a golden ticket to a completely new life. Soon after, I packed my bags and headed to São Paulo. I never looked back. I dove headfirst into the world of fashion. At first, everything was new. The lights, the backstage, the photographers shouting my name. It was a world that moved fast, and I moved with it. In just a few years, I achieved what many people take a lifetime to achieve. I worked with the best agencies, walked the runway for international brands, and secured million-dollar contracts. I was desired, admired, envied. But the truth is that the more my name grew, the smaller I felt. My life has become a never-ending agenda. I would wake up at 5 a.m. for photo shoots, spend the day in studios and beauty salons, go on diets that left me weak and grumpy, and still find the strength to go out at night. At parties, I was always surrounded by people, but I never felt so alone. Everyone wanted to be close to Sarah Oliveira, the brand, the image, but no one seemed to want to know the real Sarah, that girl from the countryside who just wanted to be seen. Over time, I began to see myself in a distorted way. Every time I looked in the mirror, I found something to fix. A line out of place, a wrinkle appearing, an extra centimeter where it shouldn't be. I became dependent on cosmetic procedures, Botox, fillers, facelifts, facial harmonization. It was a never-ending cycle. The more I sought perfection, the more distant it seemed. It was like chasing a mirage. My worth, my self-esteem, everything began to depend on the image reflected in the mirror. My relationships followed the same pattern: intense, superficial, and short. I didn't allow myself to trust. I didn't allow myself to be vulnerable. My poor family tried to get closer, but I kept them at bay. I felt ashamed of my roots, as if that simple girl had died to make way for a fabricated version of myself. It was during this whirlwind that I met Carlos, a successful businessman, confident and charming. He was different from the men I was used to. He looked me in the eye. He listened to me. He made me feel like I was more than just a pretty face. Soon, we were deeply involved. Within 6 months, we were engaged. I felt like I had finally found what I was missing in life. We planned a fairy tale wedding, lavish, exclusive, magazine-worthy. But what I didn't imagine was that long-awaited day, the day that should have been the happiest of my life, would become the turning point, the milestone of a new journey that would change everything. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up early, as I always did. My hotel room looked like a royal suite, and an entire team was already waiting for me to start getting ready. There was something magical in the air. The dress, a one-of-a-kind piece by a renowned designer, was hanging in front of the window, with the sunlight hitting the fabric and making it shine like gold. I spent hours getting ready: hair, makeup, finishing touches. I needed to look perfect. And when I saw myself ready, in front of the mirror, I confess that for a moment, I believed I had achieved what I had been searching for. I looked stunning, a living porcelain doll. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m, in a historic cathedral in the city. The reception would be in one of the most luxurious hotels I had ever set foot in. Everything was planned to the last detail. But as the clock ticked by, a sense of uneasiness began to take hold of me. At first, I thought it was just the normal nervousness of a bride about to walk down the aisle, but there was something strange, an uncomfortable feeling, as if something was about to happen, something I couldn't name. Little did I know that this strange sensation was the harbinger of a shock that would shake not only my marriage, but all my certainties about who I was and what really mattered. I ignored that strange feeling, pushed the discomfort into a quiet corner inside me, and focused on what mattered, keeping my smile. I hadn't spent years building up to this moment to let it slip away because of a vague hunch, so I took a deep breath and straightened my posture. When the time came, the music began to play softly. The church doors slowly opened, revealing a hallway lit by colorful stained glass windows and eyes fixed on me, just as I had always dreamed. My steps were slow, measured, almost rehearsed. I looked stunning, my custom-made dress sparkling in the natural light. Carlos waited for me at the altar with a restrained smile, visibly moved. But then, something happened. A sharp pain shot through my chest, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my heart tightly. For a moment, I thought it was just anxiety. After all, it was my wedding, right? But the pain didn't subside. Instead, it grew stronger by the second. My breath became shallow. My vision began to blur. The sound of the music and the murmuring of the guests became a distant echo, as if it were all happening underwater. I kept walking, stumbling slightly, trying to ignore it all, trying to keep up appearances. You can do this, Sarah, I thought. A few more steps. But then, everything went dark. I fell. There, in the middle of the hallway, in front of everyone. My body collapsed as if it had switched off, in front of hundreds of wide eyes and shocked faces. Later they told me what happened. They said there was screaming, running, despair. Carlos ran to me. Someone screamed for help. Someone called an ambulance. But I didn't see any of it. I didn't hear it. In that moment, the world as I knew it simply disappeared. It was as if I had been ripped from reality and thrown into another place, a place where the rules were completely different. The paramedics arrived quickly and began CPR right there on the church floor. I was rushed to the nearest hospital. The diagnosis came hours later, a severe heart attack caused by extreme stress and probably aggravated by the recent cosmetic procedures that had overtaxed my body. As my body lay unconscious, hooked up to machines and surrounded by doctors trying to save my life, something extraordinary happened. My consciousness, or soul if you prefer to call it that, embarked on a journey that completely defied logic. The first sensation was strange, but curiously serene. It was as if I were floating, light, free, without any pain or tension. It was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel the weight of the world on me. There were no more demands, mirrors, or judgmental voices, just silence and peace. Everything around me was dark, but it wasn't a frightening pitch black. It was a calm, welcoming void, as if I was being cradled by something bigger than I could understand. There was no time, there was no place, just me, existing. Then I saw a light. At first it was small, like a lone star in a deep sky, but as I looked, the light seemed to expand, to get closer, or maybe it was me who was moving toward it. I can't really explain it. It was as if I was being gently pulled toward something that both enchanted and disconcerted me. The light grew more and more intense, almost blinding, but it didn't hurt my eyes. It was a bright, warm light that didn't just illuminate the outside. It seemed to reach my soul. I felt a presence in it, an immense love, something impossible to describe in words. And then the sounds began. At first they were just distant murmurs, soft, almost imperceptible. Little by little they became voices, and I recognized them. They were the voices of loved ones who had passed away. My grandfather, who told me stories when I was a child. My grandmother, with her lavender scent and the warmest hug in the world. An uncle who left too soon. I even heard the bark of my first dog. Amidst the light, I saw figures begin to form, silhouettes made of light, but clearly recognizable. My grandmother smiled at me like she used to when I came home from school. My grandfather waved at me, looking younger, with a sparkle in his eyes. A wave of indescribable emotion washed over me. Joy, longing, love. It was all together, all at once. It was as if all the love I had sought for years was there, concentrated in that moment. They reached out to me, and for a moment, everything in me wanted to go. I wanted to surrender to that love, that peace, that certainty of belonging. It was the home I didn't even know I was looking for. But then, another voice emerged. It was different from all the others. It didn't come from anyone I knew, but it carried such profound strength and wisdom that it made me stop. It was a calm but firm voice, kind, but with an authority that went right through me. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. Maybe it was both, or neither. That voice was saying something, not in audible words, but straight to my consciousness, and what it was saying to me would change everything. The voice used no words, but it still conveyed a clear truth to me, impossible to ignore. My journey was not over yet. It wasn't my time yet. There was something else waiting for me in the world of the living, something important that I still needed to accomplish. At first, I resisted. Why go back? Why leave that place where everything made sense? Where I finally felt loved, welcomed, at peace. Going back meant facing the pain, the loneliness, the purposeless rush again. But the voice, firm and full of compassion, showed me glimpses of what could be. Like a movie projected inside my mind, I saw faces, some unfamiliar, some familiar, and I understood, without needing explanations, that I could make a difference in those people's lives. I saw a version of myself that I had never imagined existed. A serene woman, with eyes full of empathy, with a calm glow that came from within. I saw outstretched hands, hearts touched, lives transformed. And for the first time, I understood. My purpose was not to be admired, but to be useful. It was not to be perfect, but to be true. Slowly, I was pulled back. I could feel the light fading away, the beloved figures becoming only soft memories. The last thing I remember was the voice telling me that that light would always be with me, that even in the darkest moments it would shine within me, like a beacon to guide me. Then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, it was like being born again. The first thing I saw was the impersonal white ceiling of the hospital. The contrast with the warm light I had come from was almost cruel. The sound of the machines, the constant beeping, the hurried footsteps of the professionals, everything sounded mechanical, cold, strange. My chest hurt. Every breath felt like an uncomfortable reminder of the pain I had left behind, and of the new chance I had been given. I tried to move, but my body felt like it was made of lead. Until I heard a voice. "Sarah, you woke up. Thank God." It was Carlos. He was sitting next to me, holding my hand so tightly as if he was afraid I would disappear again. His eyes were red, filled with dried tears. For the first time, I saw in him a fragility I had never noticed before. I tried to speak, but my throat was burning. The nurse came in quickly when she realized I had woken up. She called the doctor, and soon my bed was surrounded by people examining me, asking me questions. "How do you feel? Do you feel pain? Remember what happened?" I remembered. Oh, I remembered. But how to explain that? How could I say that I had seen death up close, and that it was not something to fear, but rather a presence wrapped in love? How do I put into words an experience that touched parts of my soul I didn't even know existed? In the days that followed, while I was still hospitalized, I received visits from friends, family, and colleagues from the fashion world. They brought me flowers, messages, hugs. Everyone asked me if I was okay, if I needed anything. But I felt like an actress off stage, still wearing the costume but no longer knowing how to play the role. Carlos stayed by my side the whole time. He planned to reschedule the wedding, saying we would do everything differently. But inside me, something had changed, deeply, and I could no longer get excited about ideas that used to make me excited. Something had died in that church hallway, and something new was being born. When I was discharged a week later, returning home was like walking through a scene from a life that no longer belonged to me. The wedding dress was still there, hanging in the same place. The presents, the souvenirs from the unfinished party, the now wilted flowers, all of it seemed to belong to another woman. A woman I was no longer. I tried to get my life back to how it was before. I went to a photo shoot. I put on expensive clothes, sat in the makeup chair, and felt empty, like I was just a shell smiling at the camera. I looked in the mirror and no longer saw the perfection I was looking for. I saw a pretty face, yes, but without a soul in that routine. The trivial conversations about fashion, the elegant dinners, the flashes, everything seemed distant, almost absurd. Carlos was still there, trying to rekindle what we had, but I felt more and more distant, as if our lives had gone their separate ways while I was asleep. I looked at him and felt affection, gratitude, but I could no longer imagine the future we had planned together, because now I wanted a different kind of future. At night, I dreamed of light, of smiling faces. I woke up with a tight chest, overcome by an inexplicable longing, a feeling of having left something sacred behind. It was at that time, in that inner silence, that I understood. I needed to change everything. I needed to reconnect with the essence of the girl who dreamed, not of fame, but of meaning. I needed to discover what, in fact, made me alive, and that's how the real journey began. I simply couldn't go back to be who I was before. After what I experienced, after what I felt, there was no more space inside me for that life. It was as if a door had been opened, one of those that, once you walk through, you can never return. I knew, with a clarity I had never felt before, that I had received a second chance, and I was determined not to waste it. The weeks after I left the hospital were intense, quiet on the outside but deeply noisy on the inside. I spent hours alone, staring at the ceiling, at the sky through the window, at my own hands. Who was I now? Everything I thought defined me, fame, beauty, status, luxury, felt lifeless, like stage sets after the lights go out. I started slowly, almost timidly. The first big decision was to call my agent and cancel all commitments. No deadline, no detailed justification. I just said, I need time. Time for myself. Indefinite. She was shocked, as if I was committing a crime against my own career. She talked about campaigns already signed, million-dollar contracts, opportunities that I was wasting. But for the first time in my adult life, I didn't care about the professional consequences. For the first time, I listened to my soul, and it asked for silence, space, truth. Then I went to the closet. An entire room filled with designer clothes, shoes I had worn once and never again, bags worth more than minimum wage. I picked them up one by one. I touched the fabrics, remembering where I had worn them. Runway shows in Paris, parties in New York, editorials in Sao Paulo. It was a parade of memories, but all of them seemed to belong to character, not me. I started piling things up. Piles of clothes, shoes, accessories, all to be donated. Each piece I removed was like releasing an anchor stuck to the bottom of a shallow sea. I felt lighter, cleaner. Carlos watched everything in silence. Sometimes he tried to smile. Other times he seemed lost, as if he didn't recognize the woman he was going to marry. And maybe he really didn't, because I was also getting to know myself again. We had long, intense conversations. I told him about what I had experienced. I tried to describe the light, the love I had felt, the voices, the faces, the peace. I spoke of the clear feeling that there was still a purpose for me here, something that went far beyond contracts and magazine covers. He listened to me attentively, held my hand, but I could see in his eyes a mix of tenderness and skepticism. To him, it sounded like a side effect of the trauma. He suggested therapy. He said that perhaps I was suffering from post-traumatic stress, and that was okay. I understood, but deep down, I knew what was happening to me. It wasn't a crisis. It was an awakening, a change at the deepest level of my being. One of the most profound changes was in the way I saw my own body. Before, it was my calling card, my product, my showcase. I lived according to it, the image I projected, what I needed to fix, hide, enhance. It was a constant battle against time, against nature, against myself. But now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw something different. Not a body to be molded, but a miracle. I was alive, breathing, feeling. This body, with all its imperfections, had carried me back to life, and that was sacred. I stopped all cosmetic procedures. I gave up dyes and let my hair go back to its natural color. I put away the makeup. At first it was weird. Seeing my face naked without a filter was like meeting an old friend again. But little by little, I began to like what I saw. It was real. It was me. I also changed my diet. I gave up the suffocating diets and the senseless fasting. I started eating consciously, with pleasure, listening to my body. I exchanged the exhausting hours at the gym for walks in the sun, in contact with nature. I learned to listen to the sound of the trees, to feel the wind on my skin, to appreciate silence, that old friend that I only discovered after the fall. I began meditating every day. I wasn't looking for answers, just connection. I wanted to reconnect with that invisible thread that connected my soul to that light. And surprisingly, the more silence I made within, the brighter it shone. Of course, these changes didn't go unnoticed. People started talking. Some friends in the industry called me, worried. Others started speculating, talking about nervous breakdowns, cults, drugs. But I was beyond that. I didn't feel the pain of being judged anymore, because I knew, with every cell in my body, that I was finally on the right track. And it was in this process of self-discovery that I realized what most needed to be transformed. My relationship with Carlos. He was a good man, loving. He took care of me when I needed him most. But it wasn't just about him. It was about what we represented together, a life I no longer wanted. Our paths were diverging, and as much as it hurt, I couldn't pretend we were the same anymore. We talked a lot. We cried together. We really tried to find a middle ground. But the truth is that love cannot survive where there is no harmony of purpose. And so, with broken hearts, we decided to go our separate ways. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life, but it was also one of the greatest acts of love, for myself, for him, and for the truth that now guided my steps. But deep down I knew it was necessary. Ending my engagement with Carlos was painful. Yes, a farewell filled with love, respect, and memories. But it was also a gesture of honesty towards both of us. We needed to let go of each other's hands so that everyone could follow the true path that life now called us to follow. The months that followed were anything but easy. They were times of profound silence, of sleepless nights, of a different kind of solitude, not for lack of company, but because I was stripping myself of everything I knew. It was as if every certainty, every identity I carried was being deconstructed, and at the same time, it was a rebirth. Slowly, I discovered pieces of myself that were dormant, under layers of vanity, fear, and appearances. The near-death experience had planted a seed that grew silently within me. Something was calling me. An intense desire to give meaning to my existence, to do something that really mattered, not so others would applaud me, but to leave a deeper, more human mark. I began this search as if I were groping in the dark, but with an open heart. I read books on spirituality, philosophy, and psychology. I devoured pages that spoke about purpose, soul, and consciousness. I participated in meditation retreats, silent circles, and self-knowledge workshops. Each experience was like opening a new window within myself. It was during one of these retreats that I met Maria, a lady in her 70s, with cloud-white hair and a serene gaze that pierced the soul. We discovered by chance that she had also had a near-death experience, decades earlier. We sat under a tree on a golden late afternoon and talked for hours. She told me how, after her return, she felt the same calling I did. She began volunteering at a hospital, offering support to terminally ill patients. She spoke of how her simple act of being there, holding a hand, listening to a story, could make all the difference to someone preparing to leave. Maria's story touched me deeply. I saw myself in her, and in that moment, a light went on inside me. Maybe that was exactly my purpose, share my experience, to be a bridge between worlds, using the pain and revelation I experienced to help others find meaning, healing, and reconnection. I decided to start with small steps, without big expectations. I contacted a local support group for people who have had near-death experiences. At first, I was just going to listen. I wanted to feel less alone on my journey. I wanted to know that there were others who had also seen what I saw. But soon, I found myself speaking out, sharing, and for the first time, without fear. Talking about my experience was liberator. It was like a weight was lifted off my chest. And even more, I realized that it had value, that my story touched people in a real way. I especially remember the Lucas, a young man who had survived a serious car accident. He was lost, struggling to understand why he had come back, what the point of it all was. After one of the meetings, he came up to me and said, with tears in his eyes, "Listening to you made me feel less alone. For the first time since the accident, I feel like maybe there's a reason I'm still here." That moment left a deep impression on me. It was as if, right there, I had complete certainty. That was it. This is what I needed to do. Share, connect, heal. Little by little, I became more and more involved with the group. I started helping to organize the meetings. Soon after, I became one of the facilitators. We started to promote weekend retreats, meetings at hospitals, and lectures at community centers. I was no longer the famous model. I was just Sarah, a woman who had experienced something profound and now wanted to serve. But I wanted to go beyond intuition. I wanted to understand. I wanted tools to help even better. So I enrolled in a course psychology with a focus on thanatology, the study of death, dying, and how to deal with these processes with empathy and humanity. Each class, each book, each clinical case opened my eyes and my heart more. The deeper I went, the more I felt I was in my place. For the first time, everything made sense. It was no longer about applause or external validation. It was about presence, about listening, about bring a little of the light I saw on the other side to this world here. Of course, not everything was simple. I had moments of doubt, of missing financial security, of glamour. Sometimes memories of the old life came back, seductive. But whenever this happened, I anchored myself in that feeling I experienced in the between worlds, that inexplicable peace, that unconditional love that told me, tenderly, "You are exactly where you are supposed to be." My family, who were initially worried, gradually began to understand. My mother, especially. One day, she looked at me with teary eyes and said, "I've never seen you so light, so whole. It's as if you had finally come home." And maybe she was right, because for the first time, I felt whole. It was during this phase of transformation that a new feeling began to grow within me, an almost urgent desire to share my story with more people. It wasn't out of vanity, much less because I wanted fame. In fact, it was something much deeper. I believed, from the bottom of my heart, that my experience could bring comfort, hope, and meaning to anyone going through difficult times. It was as if that light I saw, that loving presence, was asking me not to keep everything to myself. I began to consider writing a book, perhaps giving lectures. It was all still very new, and I knew there was so much to learn, so much to grow. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet peace accompanying me every step of the way. It was as if I was walking to the rhythm of my soul. When I began to talk openly about my near-death experience, the NDE, I discovered a new layer of challenge, the skepticism, and he came from all sides. The first real proof of this came when I was invited to give a talk at a local university. At first, I was excited. It would be my first time speaking to an audience outside of my support group. I imagined that perhaps I could touch hearts, as I had done with Lucas and others, but the reality was quite different. I walked onto the stage with my heart racing but my mind calm. I told my story with sincerity. The heart attack on my wedding day, the moment when everything went dark, the welcoming light, the reunion with my grandparents, the voice that told me it wasn't my time yet, and how all of this had completely transformed my life. I talked about what I had learned, about the new meaning I had found in being here. As I spoke, I noticed cold stares, crossed arms, skeptical expressions. And when I opened it up for questions, the storm came. A neuroscience professor stood up and said, in an almost clinical tone, that what I was describing was probably a hallucination caused by hypoxia, a lack of oxygen to the brain. A psychology student suggested that I might be experiencing symptoms of a dissociative disorder. Others suggested that I might be exaggerating, or making it all up to get attention, or worse, to profit from it. At that moment, a part of me wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream that it was real, that I lived that, but I held back. I realized there was no way to prove what I had experienced, not in the way they expected. My experience was personal, deep, subjective. It didn't fit into formulas or reports. I returned home shaken. For days, I carried a weight on my chest. Should I continue? Was it worth exposing myself like this? Maybe it would be better to keep my experience in the safe circle of the support group, where I was understood. It was at this moment of doubt that I received an email. It was from a young woman named Aline. She had attended my talk at the university, and although she had never had an NDE, she wrote that my story had touched her heart deeply. She said she had been going through a dark time, depression, loneliness, confused thoughts, and that hearing about the light and unconditional love I had experienced had given her a new lease on life. Something inside her awakened. He said that for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. That email was like a hug from the light itself that welcomed me from the other side. It reminded me why I was doing it. I understood there, a powerful truth. My story didn't need to be scientifically proven to have value. If it could offer comfort to just one person, it would be worth telling. So I decided to change my approach. Instead of trying to convince skeptics of the truth of what I experienced, I began to focus in the messages that my experience has brought me. The importance of living with purpose, the beauty of genuine connections, the urgency to look beyond appearances, beyond materialism, the courage to be authentic. I also began to educate myself further. I researched the scientific studies related to near-death experiences in depth. I discovered that while science does not yet have definitive answers, there are serious researchers such as Pim van Lommel and Bruce Grayson dedicating myself to understanding this phenomenon with respect and method. This gave me tools to deal with skepticism in a more balanced and conscious way. I learned to respect skepticism, to understand it not as a barrier, but as an important part of the dialogue. Rational questions have their place, and a questioning mind is not my enemy, but my partner in building bridges between science and spirituality, between reason and experience. Over time, I realized that challenges were actually invitations to deepen my commitment to the truth of my heart, invitations to grow, to learn to communicate with more empathy, to also welcome those who still cannot believe. This phase taught me more than any other moment since my transformation. It's not about convincing, it's about connecting. And that's exactly what I kept looking for. Connections, paths, bridges. I learned a lot about humility, patience, and the importance of keeping an open mind during this phase of my life. One of the biggest transformations I experienced was being able to listen to different opinions without feeling like I was being attacked or having to shut down in defense. This not only improved the way I shared my experience, but also profoundly expanded my perspective on everything I had been through. Ultimately, I realized that the true value of my story was not in convincing anyone, but in how it had shaped me and how it could, in some way, inspire others to reflect on their own journeys. The skepticism I encountered along the way ended up becoming an essential part of my journey. Instead of being an obstacle, it became a constant invitation to grow, learn, and strengthen my conviction with more empathy and respect. It was a process that challenged me to be more firm and, at the same time, more understanding of different points of view. One of the biggest challenges I faced after my experience was rebuilding my relationships. The profound changes that occurred within me affected not only me, but also those around me. My family was the first to feel this impact. My parents, who had always been by my side during my modeling career, had a hard time understanding the choices I started to make after that. I clearly remember a particularly difficult conversation with my father when he confessed his fear that I was wasting everything I had achieved up until that point. It was a mix of concern for my financial and emotional stability. It was a slow process, full of ups and downs, but little by little I began to regain their trust. I began to spend more time with them, not only telling them about my experience, but also showing them the positive changes that were happening within me. Over time, they began to notice that I was calmer and happier. My mother, who has always been more sensitive, was the first to say that, even though she didn't fully understand what I had been through, she was happy to see me fulfilled. In the fashion world, however, the situation was different. Many friends ended up drifting away. Some thought I was going through a crisis. Others simply didn't know how to deal with this new version of myself, who no longer shared the same interests or values. Seeing friendships that had lasted for years fall apart was painful, but I also understood that it was something natural, given the changes I had experienced. Surprisingly, I found renewed connection with people from my past who I hadn't seen in a long time. Old school friends seemed more curious and open to hearing my story. A high school friend, Luciana, reconnected after hearing about my experience. She had recently lost her husband and found comfort in our conversations about life and death. Our friendship deepened in ways I never could have imagined. But the most complicated relationship to rescue was with Carlos, my ex-fiancé. After the breakup, we didn't speak to each other for months, until by chance we met in a cafe almost a year after my experience. The beginning of the conversation was a bit strange, full of silences and insecurities, but little by little we started to open up to each other. He told me how difficult it was to accept the changes I was experiencing, but that, over time, he began to respect my journey. Although we couldn't go back to the way we were before, we were able to build a friendship based on respect and understanding, something I never imagined possible. One of the most beautiful surprises was meeting new people through the near-death experience support group. People like Maria, a lady I met on a retreat, and Lucas, a young man who went through something similar, became a fundamental part of my life. These friendships had a depth I had never experienced before. They were bonds built on a mutual understanding of something very intense and transformative. As I became more involved in volunteer work and speaking engagements on near-death experiences, I met a wide range of people: doctors, scientists, therapists, and spiritual people. Many of them became friends and mentors, and together we expanded my perceptions, not only about my own story, but about life as a whole. One of the most powerful lessons I learned from this journey was the importance of authenticity. I discovered that in order to rebuild any relationship, you need to be true to yourself and to the other person. That's how I began to connect in a deeper and more sincere way, living each moment with more lightness and purpose. Before my near-death experience, NDE, many of my relationships revolved around appearances and superficial interests. It was as if everything was based on a facade, where the important thing was to impress or please, and not necessarily to truly connect. But after that life-changing experience, something deep inside me changed. I began to seek something completely different, real connections, those that go beyond the surface, that touch the heart, and make us grow together. I learned, with great difficulty and courage, to be vulnerable. It wasn't just about showing my strengths, but also making room for doubts, fears, insecurities, those parts of ourselves that we normally hide for fear of being judged or rejected. This vulnerability, while scary at first, is what has brought me the truest, deepest relationships I've ever had. Of course, it wasn't always easy. In the early days, loneliness hit me hard. I missed my old life, the friends who seemed distant now, the security of routine, and the world I'd left behind. There were days when I was almost paralyzed by longing, and I wondered if I'd made the right choice in following such a different path. But as time went on, one thing became clear. The relationships I was building now had a much more genuine and intense flavor. They were based on shared values, mutual respect, and a genuine desire to grow and understand each other. This brought me a satisfaction that nothing in my previous life had been able to offer. One of the greatest joys of this change was realizing how these new connections began to reflect in other areas of my life. My volunteer work took on a special meaning because, by connecting deeply with the people I helped, I felt like I was doing something real. My speaking engagements also became more powerful. I wasn't just talking about my experience, but about the lessons I learned through the relationships I built afterward. If I look back, I see that rebuilding these bonds was, above all, a process of learning about letting go. Letting go of what no longer served me, and making room for the new, for what really did me good and helped me evolve. This taught me a lot about who I am and who I want to become. Today, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for all the relationships I have. They are a constant reminder of the love and connection I experienced during my NDE, and living proof that it is possible to bring a little bit of that unconditional love into our daily lives, even in the simplest of things. As the years went by, the challenge became less about dealing with immediate changes. What really mattered was integrating this transformative experience into every aspect of my daily life. It was no longer about grand gestures or dramatic revolutions, but about how I could live, every day, carrying with me the lessons I had learned. One of the practices that has helped me the most is daily meditation. Every morning, before starting my day, I would set aside a few minutes to reconnect with that sense of peace and love that I felt during my experience. At first, my mind would jump from one thought to another, and it was difficult to stay focused. But with patience and practice, these moments of silence have become precious anchors that keep me centered and calm, even in the face of everyday storms. Another profound change was the way I began to relate to nature. Before my NDE, I barely paid attention to the natural world around me. I was rushing from one task to the next, distracted and rushed. Now, I cherish every moment I can spend outdoors. Whether it's a walk in the park, tending to the plants in my garden, or simply sitting in the sun for a while. These little moments help me feel like I'm part of something bigger, that my life is connected to something far beyond myself. My relationship with work has also changed a lot. Even though I left the fashion world, I still needed to support myself, so I decided to use my communication skills in a new and meaningful way. I started working part-time as a counselor at a palliative care center. It's emotionally intense work, no doubt, but extremely rewarding. Being able to be there for people who are facing death or who are dealing with the loss of loved ones has given me a sense of purpose that I hadn't found before. At home, I made changes to make my environment reflect my new values. I simplified everything, giving away many luxury items that I previously considered essential. I created a small sanctuary in the corner of the living room, with plants, crystals, and a comfortable meditation cushion. This space became my refuge, my safe haven, for those moments when I needed to reconnect with everything I had experienced. And perhaps one of the most significant changes has been in the way I deal with conflict and stress. Before, I was known for having an explosive temper and for holding grudges that only weighed on my heart. Today, I have learned to take a deep breath, to choose my battles, and, above all, to forgive myself and others. This change has brought more lightness and balance to my life and to my relationships. Today, I strive to face life's challenges with more compassion and understanding. It's not always easy. There have been days when I've stumbled, failed, and felt lost. But remembering the unconditional love I experienced during my NDE gives me the strength to keep trying, even when the path seems too difficult. My relationship with food has also changed profoundly. I've adopted a more plant-based diet, not for fashion or aesthetic reasons, but out of genuine respect for life in all its forms. I've begun to see food not just as fuel, but as a bridge of connection, with the earth that sustains us, with the people who grow and prepare the food, and of course with my own body, which deserves care and attention. Another aspect that has changed is my relationship with time. Before this experience, I was constantly rushing around, always aiming for the next goal, the next achievement, as if life were an endless race. Now, I try to live more in the present, delighting in the small details, the warm taste of a cup of tea, the soft sound of rain hitting the window, the spontaneous laughter of a child on the street. These simple moments have become as valuable as any great victory. My social life has also changed a lot. Before, I would try to be present at the most popular events, trying to keep up with the frenetic pace of the fashion world. Today, I prefer more intimate and meaningful encounters, quiet dinners at home with close friends, deep conversations that feed the soul, volunteering in the community that connects me to something bigger. These small experiences are, for me, sources of true joy. But integrating this experience into your daily life doesn't mean living in a permanent state of spiritual ecstasy. There have been difficult days, filled with doubts and frustrations. At times, I found myself slipping into old patterns of thinking or behaving that I thought I'd left behind. In those moments, I've learned to be gentle with myself, remembering that growth is a process, a journey with ups and downs. One practice that has helped me a lot is keeping a journal. Every night before going to sleep, I would write about my day, the times when I was able to live according to the lessons of my NDE, and also the times when I failed. This exercise helped me cultivate awareness and responsibility for my own evolution. Over time, I realized that integrating the experience was not about trying to relive that transcendental experience every moment, but rather about bringing its teachings into the here and now, with all the complexity, challenges, and beauty of real life. It was about learning to live with more awareness, compassion, and gratitude, even in the simplest details of everyday life. Looking back today, I can see that every small change, every conscious choice, was a way of honoring the second chance I was given. My NDE was not an isolated event, but a beacon that lights my path every day. Years later, when I look at Sarah who walked down that aisle dressed as a bride, ready for a life of glamour and success, I see a very different person. I often ask myself, if I could go back in time and prevent that heart attack, would I do it? The answer, surprisingly, is no. As frightening and painful as it was, that moment of crisis was the trigger for a profound and necessary transformation. The near-death experience taught me lessons that no book, lecture, or worldly success could have taught me. I learned about the fragility and preciousness of life, about love, not romantic or conditional love, but universal, unconditional love, the most powerful force there is. I also discovered that there is much more to existence than what we can see or touch, beyond what current science can explain. But perhaps the biggest lesson was about purpose. Before, I was chasing fame, wealth, beauty, things that I believed would bring me happiness. Now, I understand that true purpose lies in how we touch people's lives, in how we spread love and compassion in the world. Of course, the journey was not easy. There were moments of fear, doubt, and loneliness. I lost friends, faced skepticism and misunderstanding. I had to rebuild my life from scratch, redefine who I was and what I wanted to be. But each challenge, each obstacle, strengthened my conviction and deepened my understanding. Today, I continue walking, transformed and grateful, ready to live each day with more meaning and truth. One of the greatest joys I've found in this new path has been the opportunity to help others, whether through my work at the hospice, the lectures I'm honored to give, or simply through the connections I make in my daily life. It's a huge privilege to be able to share a little of the light I've experienced myself, to see relief spread across the eyes of someone facing death, to feel hope rekindle in the hearts of those who have just lost a loved one. These moments carry a value that no amount of applause on the catwalk could ever surpass. Many people still ask me if I'm afraid of death. The truth is that it doesn't scare me anymore, not because I want to leave, quite the opposite. I love life and want to live it to the fullest extent possible. But today, I see death not as a definitive end, but rather as a passage, a natural transition. I feel that there is something beyond, something beautiful and full of love that awaits us when we get there. That's not to say I have all the answers. There's still a lot of mystery, a lot of things that are beyond my understanding, about my experience, about the nature of reality, about what comes next. But I've learned to be comfortable with that uncertainty, to embrace the mystery rather than fear it. If I could leave a message for those who are listening to my story, it would be this: live with love. And I'm not talking about the superficial, shallow love we see in movies or in the media, but a deep, unconditional love for yourself, for others, for life in all its forms. Cultivate gratitude, even for the simplest things, the little details that often go unnoticed. Seek connection with the people around you, with nature, with something greater than yourself. And remember, each of us has a unique purpose. It may not be grand or spectacular in the eyes of the world, but it is meaningful. Sometimes it is as simple as offering a smile to a stranger, listening attentively to a friend, caring for a little piece of nature. Every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, creates ripples of positivity that go beyond what we can see. My near-death experience showed me that there is so much more to life and beyond than meets the eye or the mind. It also taught me that the real miracle happens here and now, in the way we choose to live each day, each moment. Today, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see the famous model I once was. I see a woman who has traveled an extraordinary journey, who has found a greater purpose. I see someone who is still learning, day after day, how to bring a little bit of that light and love to the world around her. I'm not perfect, far from it. I make mistakes. I have bad days. I still struggle with old habits and insecurities. But the big difference is that now I see every challenge as an opportunity to grow, and every encounter as a chance to spread a little more love. Sometimes I wonder, what if I had died that day? What would my life have been like? Maybe I would still be walking the world's most famous runways, living what many would call a dream. But today I know it would have been an empty life, a constant search for something that fame and wealth could never fulfill. I am immensely grateful for the life I have now, a life that is simpler in many ways, but infinitely richer in meaning and purpose. Every morning when I wake up, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for another day, another opportunity to make a difference, however small. For those reading my story, I want to say that you don't have to go through a near-death experience to live a life full of purpose and meaning. Transformation is within reach for all of us, at any time. All we need to do is be open, willing to question our limiting beliefs, and brave enough to follow the path of our hearts. If my story can touch even one person, inspiring them to live with more love and compassion, I will feel that I have fulfilled my purpose in sharing it, because at the end of the day, that's what life is all about: connections, love, making a difference in each other's lives. I close these reflections with a feeling of deep gratitude for life, for the second chance I have been given, for each person who has crossed my path on this journey, and with the certainty in my heart that the unconditional love I have experienced on the other side is not confined to a distant spiritual plane. It is here, now, available to all of us. I believe that all we need is to open our hearts to feel this love and open our eyes to see it in every detail of the life around us. It is as if it were always there, present in every gesture, in every moment, just waiting for us to allow ourselves to notice it. And so I continue my journey, step by step, day after day, trying to be a channel for this light, for this love that I was lucky enough to experience. I don't know what the future holds for me, maybe challenges, maybe surprises, but I know that as long as I carry the memory of that transformative experience alive within me, I will be on the right path. My hope is that each of us can find our true purpose, live our lives in a genuine way, guided by love. And that together, we can make this world a little bit lighter, kinder, more hopeful. Because, at the end of the day, that's how we make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time.